Wow. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Let's hear it one more time. What an introduction. I'm incredibly humbled. Sheriff Joe Cryan, soon to be Senator Joe Cryan. And to all the elected officials here, led by the great mayor of the great community of Elizabeth, Chris Bolwich. Chris, thank you very much for what you said. And Madam President Margaret, where'd you go? You lead one of the great institutions of higher education in this state. You have our enormous respect. Thank you. What a treat it is to be here. It's not even my first stop in Elizabeth today. I'm incredibly honored to be hanging in Elizabeth for a few hours. And I'm so humbled to be with you all. What a great group. And it's a great group of not just folks who came out who want to see a change in this state, but also a great group of elected officials and candidates. And I think Hillary Clinton had that phrase, "It takes a village." Joe Cryan humbled me, almost embarrassed me with his introduction of me. But no matter how good I am, and I'm not nearly as good as Joe thinks I am, you can't do it alone. We need to bring across the finish line a whole host of like-minded brothers and sisters. Whether it's the three freeholder spots that are up this year with 2 incumbents and Mayor Garrettson running for the 3rd. Whether it's in a tough district that Bruce is running in the 21st where we got a shot. Or our incumbents in the 20th and the 22nd, and including Joe now running for Senate. Or Pete Corvelli. Is Pete here? I miss Pete. Pete, to run as sheriff. To look at some of the local races that have consequence, whether it's a Westfield where we're trying to come from behind, or a Cranford, or a Summit, right? Or a New Providence. There are races all up and down the ballot. I'm running, look at who I'm running with, Sheila Oliver, man. Let's get it up for Sheila Oliver. And my point is this, is that I'm humbled by your coming out tonight. I'm humbled by your support. It means more than you know, and we have work to do. We have work to do. We can't take this thing for granted. Joe mentioned we have 70 days to go, 70 days to go. And people ask me all the time, are you in a good place? I said, yeah, I think I'm in a good place. I also thought the Brits were going to stay in Europe and Hillary Clinton was going to get elected president of the United States. And we see that elections have consequences, right? So we can't, hey, Bruce, we can't take anything, not one vote, not $1. The firefighters were raising it for me an hour ago. Not $1 for granted, not one policy idea, big or small. There's just too much at stake. And so getting all of us in a room like this together and getting fired up, that's good for the home team. We got to make sure we're focused, laser-like, between now and November 7 on doing all that we can to get as many of us, Roosevelt loved that, across the goal line as possible. And I'm incredibly honored to be at the top of that ballot. What a group of incredible individuals to be running with. Couple of points of housekeeping. You've got a question, you've got these cards in front of you. Please fill them out. And then when you haven't filled out, just raise your hand like this and somebody from Team Murphy will come in and swoop it and take it out of your hands. The reason why we need you to fill it out completely is because we may not get to all your questions. And we're really good at following up. So if we don't get to it, please bear with us. We'll try to get to it. I literally write handwritten letters every Friday night as an example. But we'll also, if we get 10 questions on infrastructure, we'll pull them together and we'll ask one that covers all 10, okay? So that's one housekeeping matter. Another housekeeping matter, we want to hear your questions and comments. I'm going to speak for a little bit, then we'll throw it open. Make sure you put the microphone right up to your mouth. Who's on the microphones tonight? Denise, are you on there? And Jenny? Yeah, so we got a few. So when you get the microphone, get it right up to your mouth, because it's not just us. We have folks, we're on Facebook Live right now. Let's give a big wave to Facebook. Our friends on Facebook have to hear us. We also have folks who have called in on the telephone who are listening in. Sam, how many we got tonight? 4,280 people listening in right now. So when you've got questions or comments, Reverend, make sure that microphone's right up close. Does that sound okay? Okay, let's get at it for a few minutes. I'm gonna take some of my clothing off here, not too much, by the way. Everybody relax. So I mentioned what's at stake here in terms of the days left and the ballot and it takes a whole village. We're here for one reason, and frankly, one reason only. And that's we being Sheila and myself and the whole team. And that is we stand for a stronger, fairer economy that works not just for some, but for all families in the great state of New Jersey, period. And elections are choices, right? And so this is about you and us and the choices that we're going to make on November 7th. And we're staring at a state with a leadership in Governor Christie and Lieutenant Governor Guadagno that have run the state for over 7.5 years. They've made their choices. And we know the implications and the consequences. Now it's time to make our choice on November 7th. Now, what state have they created in their leadership? It's not pretty. It's a state that's in crisis. It's a state with an economy that's neither strong nor fair and does not work for all of us. It works for very few of us. So they've made choices. They've given huge tax breaks to large corporations and at the same time underfunded public education in the state by $9 billion to pick one choice they've made. They have vilified and ignored those brothers and sisters in the public sector unions in this state, including the firefighters we were just with, and the police and the first responders and the educators up and down this state. Those are choices that they made. They took care of the really wealthy among us, and it was at the expense of the rest of us, particularly those who are in working poor or in poverty around this state. So they have made choices, and we are now living with the consequences, right? And you could describe the consequences in the state we're in any number of ways. I'll give you a few ways. Number one, we've been downgraded by the rating agencies that judge our health fiscally 11 straight times. Last year on record was an all-time increase in household income in America. That's the good news. The bad news is New Jersey finished 50 out of 50. And get this, household income. That's what allows us the security to provide for our kids and our futures. Household income during their time as governor, lieutenant governor in this state is down 5%. I don't think you can say that about any other state in the country. This is one of the biggest upticks in wealth in our nation's history. Yet in New Jersey, on average, families are taking home 5% less, hello Carolyn, than they did 7 years ago. Carolyn, by the way, runs one of the great boxing establishments in Newark in the state, if not the country. I was thinking of you watching Floyd Money Mayweather and Conor McGregor at 1:30 in the morning on Saturday night. I was looking, where's Carolyn? Is she in that front row there? But that's a shocking statistic. We lead the nation in foreclosed homes. We have 9% of the foreclosed homes in America. Atlantic County leads all counties in foreclosed homes in the United States of America. Think about that for a second. This is New Jersey. That's what the leadership of Christie and Guadagno has brought us. It's not a fair economy. It's not a strong economy. And it doesn't work for almost all of us. So we need leadership that will achieve, with the right priorities, get back to basics, grow this economy, make it fair again, and make it work for not just some of us, but for all of us. And that's what we stand for, let there be no doubt. Now, what do we got to do? We got to grow our economy. We don't grow. We have to grow again. I think we grow by reigniting a couple of economic engines that we used to dominate, that we used to rely on. The innovation economy and the infrastructure economy. And by the way, I'm not just saying this because I'm in Elizabeth. I don't know where the mayor went, but there he is right here. I think Elizabeth and Union County, more generally, has the potential of being the big winners if you reignite the innovation and the infrastructure economies, right? You can make the case that New Jersey was Silicon Valley before there was a Silicon Valley, right? You think about it: Bell Labs, Sarnoff Labs, bio, healthcare, pharma, life sciences. We've let a lot of that edge go. Now, I'm an optimist. Why? Well, one, we've done it in the past. Two, we have all the pieces of the puzzle right in front of us, except for the leadership piece that understands how you knit it together. And thirdly, importantly, other states that look like us. You know, when the car business, when they stopped making cars in New Jersey and the Northeast, that went to right-to-work states in the South. But the innovation economy, when it left us, it went to other states that look like us. Take Massachusetts. Northeast, similar weather, dense, highly educated, lots of legacy issues, as expensive, frankly, more expensive to live and do business in than New Jersey. They're cleaning our clock on that economy. I don't like that, but it gives me optimism that if they can do it, we could do it again. Or the infrastructure economy. That's a simple one for me. Take complete advantage of our God-given location that 49 other states would die to swap in with us. It's ports, please God, it's ports, right here in Elizabeth. It's roads, it's bridges, it's tunnels, it's rail. Please allow me to get this off my chest. You would think, if you were the fourth smallest state geographically in the nation, which we are, and you were the densest state in the nation, which we are, and if you sat next to the largest market in the world, which we do, you'd think leadership of this state that I've just described, if they screwed everything else up, the one thing they'd get right would be commuter rail. You got to be kidding me. And should we be surprised? I don't think so. They cut the state support for NJ Transit by 90%. That's 9-0. Fares have gone up during their time in leadership by 36%. Apparently, according to some testimony we all read last week, they backed the truck up with people who don't have any experience in commuter rail running the thing. We got what we should expect to get, right? And so that's one example of many. Let's grow the economy by reigniting the innovation economy, by reigniting the infrastructure economy. Make our economy strong again. But let's also make our economy fair again. I wish there was one move on the chessboard that we could make that would make it fair, but there isn't. I do think there are a series of steps that, when taken together, have the cumulative impact of a much fairer economy. What's on my list? Minimum wage going to $15 an hour. Earned sick leave, not just for some, but for everybody. Child dependent care tax credit. Maybe, hopefully, we can find the money, caregiver tax credit. How about this? How about equal pay for equal work? This is a state where a woman on average earns 80% of what a man earns for the exact same work. If you're an African American woman, it's less than 60. If you're a Latina, it's less than 50. There are laws in other states that are proving that that gap can be shrunk. What are we missing? We're missing a governor who cares about shrinking that gap. This governor doesn't. If we get elected, we will. You have my word. I don't know where Margaret went, but how about making college more affordable again? That's on my list. I got nothing against anyone here go to the University of Maine? Before I jump in it with both feet? I got nothing against the University of Maine. Remember the billboards they had? They might have been in Elizabeth, up over the turnpike in the winter and early spring. Come on up and give us a visit. Our out-of-state tuition is lower than your in-state tuition. I said to somebody recently, either we're going to change that math or we're going to burn the billboard down. Or maybe both. But college affordability. How about cracking the back of the affordable home crisis? That too. The foreclosed home crisis. And this, by the way, is another one of these things we ought to be pulling our hair out. Christie and Guadagno should know this, but they're doing nothing about it. There's federal money that's sitting there. Other states are doing this. You work with nonprofits. You go, you make your case, you get the federal money, you give it to the nonprofits, they buy up the vacant foreclosed homes, and then they repurpose them as affordable housing rentals. You kill two birds with one stone. Other states are doing it. We're not doing it. Why? Because of leadership or lack of leadership. It's that simple. A big one for us, and I'll conclude with this one on fairness. We need comprehensive criminal justice reform, and we need it desperately. We have, and Joe mentioned, I just recently stepped down from the national board of the NAACP, the nation's oldest, the world's oldest civil rights and social justice organization, needed now more than ever, mostly for all the wrong reasons, I might add. But I look at it as much through that lens as I do as a candidate for governor. We have the widest white, non-white gap of persons incarcerated in New Jersey in America. In America. And there are things that can be done, reforms that can be made. A big reason, it's not the only reason, a big reason are low-end drug crimes, as an example. I support legalization of marijuana first and foremost as a social justice matter. But there are other steps that must be taken. So let's get a stronger economy that grows by reigniting those engines. Let's get a fairer economy and society again. I want to raise my hand in one last category and say, with your help, I ask with humility, I want to be the governor of the state that we used to be. And I don't mean this nostalgia tour that our president takes us on back to some time that never existed. If it did, it was imperfect to begin with, and it will never exist again. Putting that aside, I mean recapturing. By the way, I stepped down from the board of the NAACP shortly after this, as my wife would say, he who shall not be named was elected president. And my last board meeting was about a month after he was inaugurated, and somebody asked me how the conversation was. I said, well, let's put it this way. There wasn't a whole lot of nostalgia around that table for the good old days in 1955. So with all due respect, Mr. President, this is America. This room is America. Elizabeth is America. And I got nothing against Bedminster, but he ought to come to Elizabeth sometime. You know what I'm saying? So I say that because not to be on some nostalgia tour, but I want to remind us of a group of words that used to describe us with great pride. And I want to be the governor of the state where those words once again describe New Jersey. What words are on my list? Well, we grew and we were fair, so we had a strong economy and a fair economy. It worked for everybody, not just for some of us. We were responsible, AAA bond rating not that long ago. We were proudly progressive. We did big things. We stood for smart government. We had inclusive leadership. We treated each other with mutual respect, even when we didn't agree. So no shut up and sit down baloney. And you stop right there for a second. And I'm an optimist, by the way. So I am an optimist. None of those words, not one of those words apply to us today. Not one single word. So I want to raise my hand and I want to ask for your support to be the governor of the state where those words apply again. A state that has a strong economy that grows. A state and a society that's fair, that works for everyone, with leadership that's inclusive. A state that does big things. A state that stands for smart government. A state that's responsible. I'm not sure we're going to be a AAA bond-rated state on Monday, but we could draw a line and say, you know what, we're not falling from here. A state that's proudly progressive, just like we used to always be. So that means, among other things, funding Planned Parenthood again. That means, while respecting the Second Amendment, signing sensible gun safety laws that will make our community a lot safer than they are now. It means accepting the sad reality of climate change and then putting forth a real plan, which we have done, to have ultimately a 100% clean energy New Jersey. A state, again, that does big things, stands for smart government, that's professional in the way it operates. And lastly, a state, a word I'm increasingly drawn to, that is compelling. Compelling for whether it's a young woman graduating from college trying to figure out where to start her career, or a young couple trying to figure out where to start their family, or a small or medium-sized business trying to figure out where to put their roots down, or a senior, and we have them all over the state, up and down the state, trying to figure out, do I stay or do I go? That once again, we're a state where people say, you know what, you got to look at New Jersey. There's too much going on there. They've got momentum. Something is happening. You'll make a mistake if you don't put New Jersey on your list. And we'll get there. We will be compelling again. But what do we need? We need the right leadership with the right priorities that believes and will achieve a stronger economy, a fairer economy, and an economy that works not just for some, but for all of us. And with your help, we will get that and then some. Now, before we break, I have to say this. First of all, thank you all for your support, for coming out, and for all that is still ahead of us to do. We have 70 days of a lot of hard work to get from here to where we want to get to. And this is a big one, right? So you could argue it's the most consequential election in our state's modern history for the 9 million of us who live inside the four walls of New Jersey. If you are a Democrat and you look at our state, the state of our party nationally, you'll note that we have only 15 governors. That's the lowest in almost 100 years. It also must be said that we're one of only 2 statewide races in America this year. The governor of Virginia and the governor of New Jersey. Next year there are 36 races. And we happen to be first up to bat in the era of the Trump presidency. So for all of the above reasons, this one really matters. Most importantly, for the 9 million of us who live inside the four walls of this great state. So I thank you. I also encourage you to follow us for a couple of reasons. Murphy4NJ is our, Murphy4NJ, number 4NJ.com is our website. Please follow us. You've invested in yourselves with your energy and time, in some cases money, and knocking on doors and answering phones. You deserve to see how we're doing. That's the investment you've made. I'd love you to follow your investment and see how we're doing. But there's another reason I want you to follow us. And that is, we have to walk and chew gum every day. We have to play two-dimensional chess. On the one hand, we have to focus laser-like on what we need to do to get New Jersey back on its feet. Growing the economy, making it strong, making it fair again, criminal justice reform, funding Planned Parenthood, all the things that we've got to do inside of our great state. But we cannot ignore what's coming at us out of Washington, and we won't. So when there is a health care bill that passes the House of Representatives, and empirically speaking, victim state number 1 in provision of health care and an expense of that provision is New Jersey, we will speak out. If there's a tax plan that looks like it's written on the back of a cocktail napkin, and for different reasons, victim state number 1 is New Jersey, we will speak out. When whole religions are discriminated against, when there's weeks of anti-Semitic behavior that is met with silence, when you have a complete breakdown in moral authority from the president, as we saw in Charlottesville 2 weeks ago, we will not be silent. And by the way, it must be said that our lieutenant governor has still not condemned one of her colleagues in the assembly in the state of New Jersey who stood in front of a Confederate flag over the weekend in New Jersey and put out a wise guy social media posting. She has still not condemned him. So on moral authority, you don't get a gentleman's C. You don't get a B+ for trying. Moral authority is pass, fail. The president has failed the test. Others, I hope, We'll find a way not to. But I want you to know we are the most diverse state in the nation. We will not be silent in the face of a failure of leadership of that proportion, particularly in moral authority. Before we break, let's all make sure in our hearts and our minds and our prayers we give it up for our brothers and sisters in Houston and Texas and the Gulf, because they need our help. So I'll conclude by saying I cannot thank you enough for coming out tonight. This means more than you know. I'm incredibly humbled. I'm loving the fact we're in Elizabeth, in Union County, with so many friends. That's all I got. I want to hear what you've got. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Are those for me?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This is the fun part now. We get to answer your questions. There are a lot of questions tonight, and we have 3 people on the microphones tonight. We are going to have Ezra, Amit, and Denise, who's going to take my microphone. My ask to you is that if your question gets asked, you keep your question succinct.
Thank you so much for coming out.
And I'll ask Phil to keep his answer succinct but substantial so we can get to as many of your questions as possible. We're looking to get through as many as possible tonight. If we don't get to your question, we will answer it as long as you put on some kind of contact information on your card. You would be surprised. I get cards all the time without contact information, and I can't answer the question, even if I know your name. So please make sure to be succinct, and we'll start with our question session. Again, Ezra's here, Amit's there, and Denise will be over here.
Let's go.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Joyce, is it Cargill or Carlisle?
Cargill.
Where are you, Joyce?
Right here.
Come on, come on. Let's go. You got a question about the Affordable Care Act.
Yes, I do.
May I? First of all, honored to be with you.
Nice to meet you.
Where are
I
you
see
coming in
you
from?
every day on TV.
Are you in Elizabeth?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for having us in your town. Do you want to read this out or?
Yes. Will you be for not replacing or repeal Obamacare?
Let's hear it for Joyce.
It's my lifeline. I need my Medicaid and for my medicine
God
and
bless you.
everything.
All right, man. Love you. Let's hear it for Joyce. I think you were trying to trap me with a double negative in there, Joyce. I am for the Affordable Care Act. And I'm against repeal and replace. So I'm with you. All right? Listen, this one's not that hard. I mentioned a minute ago, if that Republican bill were to go through in the Congress, victim state number 1 will be New Jersey. Well, you need to know a little bit as to why. 800,000 people have health care coverage in this state who didn't have it before, many of them for the first time. We have, Matt Plotkin, 3.5 million people with pre-existing conditions in this state. 3.5 million people with pre-existing conditions. We have tens of thousands of kids who are now able to stay on their parents' medical coverage until the age of 26, right? We have women who have access to contraception unlike before, seniors who have access to medicine that they didn't have before. Joyce has got access to medicine that you may not have had before, and you certainly wouldn't if it were to be repealed. And if that weren't enough, it's employed double digits, thousands of new jobs in this state. So you get some sense of the consequences of this potential repeal and replace. So far, so good. Sheila Oliver right now is doing a town hall in New Brunswick with the resistance movement. And healthcare, right? Healthcare has been a big part of that movement. And so far, so good. But I don't think we can take anything for granted. Do you agree? And there's a big debate in our party, should we, you remember last year in the primary between Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders, do you burn down the Affordable Care Act, which is imperfect, even President Obama admits that, and start from scratch? Or you say we're halfway up the mountain, let's make this as good as we can make it. I was on the we're halfway up the mountain. If the Republicans and Trump keep throwing things at us, I think we have to have all options on the table. I think the realistic, listen, as Paul Krugman said recently, the principle here is universal health care coverage. That's the principle. That's the objective. There are lots of different and good ways to get from here to there. Let's work with each other and find the best way. I think at the moment the best way is to defend what we have and continuing to defend it. Joyce, thank you. I'm so annoyed that I can't read without glasses anymore. This is such an annoyance. Sarah Moore, are you here? Sarah, where are you? Come on. In from Hillside. Let's get up for Sarah. How are you?
I'm good.
You have a question on DACA.
Yes.
First of all, let's go. Live action photo, not posed.
Hi, my name is Sarah Mora, and I am a DACA student. I just recently graduated from Union County College with
I
my
love you,
associates.
Sarah. Come on.
So as you know, Trump is threatening to end the DACA program. If my DACA is revoked, I will be thrown into the deportation pipeline with 800,000 young people throughout the country. And even still, as a DACA student in New Jersey, my dream of becoming the first in my family to graduate with a bachelor's degree is seriously delayed because I am not eligible for state financial aid. It's incredibly frustrating to have to go to school part-time, and more than that, it is so hurtful to feel like New Jersey doesn't have my back like I have hers. As governor, what will you do for our DACA youth in New Jersey?
Let's hear it for Sarah, man. Congratulations. Well done. Wow. This is a big one. It's high on the list of things, Sarah, that underpin the following statement, general statement. I think we will look back, particularly during the Trump years, and conclude that governors will have never mattered more. So this is a big deal election, probably for that reason more than any other. Because given all the chaos, in the inaction, in the wrong-headedness, and frankly, un-American behavior coming out of Washington, we need to be the best we can be at the state level. And at or near the top of the list is the DACA phenomenon, which turned 5, I think, 2 weeks ago. So 5th anniversary. And this is a big one. So before Trump, so before BT, and I've spent a lot of time in the Latino community in particular, but in a lot of communities in this city, in this county, in this state, I was talking about, this is when I thought Hillary Clinton would be the president, I talked about things we needed to do in the state. Number one, I'm standing strong for, and I continue to be, for statewide identification cards. I stand strong for access to driver's license regardless of status, which I think is a big deal. And, which would have helped you, I stand strongly on behalf of not just DACA Dreamers having access to in-state tuition, but in-state financial aid. So we still stand for all of that, and we'll get there. But then you have, on top of that, you now have Trump. And that adds a level of urgency and starkness to the leadership question that we didn't have before. So we have said the following. Number one, we will establish an Office of Immigrant Protection at the state level. A one-stop shop, probably, in fairness, more legal services than not, but a one-stop shop that folks, regardless of their status, they've got a phone number they can call up and get their questions answered and hopefully get help. Secondly, we have said that we will stand up to the president. And by the way, picking the attorney general is a big pick if we're fortunate enough to get elected, because the governor and the attorney general both need steel backbones. Sheila Oliver's got that. I've got it. We need an attorney general alongside of us, and stand up to the president and say, Mr. President, no, you will not do that in the great state of New Jersey. You will not use our state and local police to unlawfully frisk our residents, to use DACA data against our dreamers when they gave it so forthrightly and so willingly, to unlawfully break up and deport dreamers or families. So we will stand up. We will have your back, I promise you, because that's America. You know, that's America. I'm guided by the poem at the base of the Statue of Liberty. Donald Trump has read a poem. It is a different poem. I don't know what it is. The poem that guides me is, bring us, come ashore. This is America. This is the beacon of immigration. This is the beacon of hope and opportunity. And you are the future of America, Sarah, right there. Alan Cohen, did I get it right, Alan? From Hillside? No, Hillside. Elizabeth. Is it what?
Hillside Road, Elizabeth.
Hillside Road and Elizabeth. You're trying to throw me a curveball there, Alan. How are you, man? I don't have the microphone, but it's coming at you.
All right, I'm interested in the State Bank.
You got a question on the public bank. Do you want to see this?
Well, I'll
You'll ad-lib?
I'll ad lib.
Okay.
You know, how are you doing with regard to the State Bank? I'm all in favor of it. I think the county has some interesting things. We have a county economic development, and we have a county credit union. We're somewhat in the banking business already.
Yep.
Tell us about the bank that you contemplate.
Love it. Let's hear it for Alan. Love this. Thank you, man. Alan, did you keep your question? No, I need that back. Only because we want to know how to find you. Thank you for that. So this is an idea that I'm in love with, I have to admit. So I run the risk of falling in love with my own ideas. But it's a pretty simple concept, and I think it's got a huge potential impact in the state. And here goes. By the way, it's been done once in the history of the United States. So North Dakota. So first question you ought to ask is, Murphy, if it's such a good idea, how come it's only been done once? I think it's because the bankers don't like it. But don't tell anybody. Thankfully, no one's listening. Oh, sorry. So here's the concept. Elizabeth, Union County, a Board of Education, the state, in particular the state, collects taxes and fees, and they put them in the bank until they have to pay them out in expenses, just like any of us do, right? So far, so good. Communities, and to a certain extent counties, tend to put that money in community banks. We love that, and we hope they continue to do that. Community banks are in our community, they're among us, and we need them to be strong and vibrant because they take care of a lot of the needs locally that we have. The state, however, particularly in this administration, takes the revenues and they put them either in big money center or foreign banks, or they buy commercial paper from corporations, including, by the way, from the Koch brothers. That's true. Matt, am I right? You can look it up. You can look it up. Matt Plackett will show you where to look it. So that money leaves New Jersey, and it funds the operations of these banks and these companies around the world, and hardly any of it comes back into New Jersey. One bank 2 years ago had average daily balances from New Jersey public entities of $1.2 billion. That bank made that year 3 loans in total into New Jersey through the Small Business Administration for a total of $220,000. So you don't need to be a math major to realize that there's a mismatch. So what's the concept? The concept is to take that money, establish a bank owned by the citizens, the People's Bank of New Jersey, for profit, and at the end of the year, if it makes a profit, we all either directly or indirectly get a dividend. Not a bad result. That bank then does the exact opposite of what's happening now. Its charter will say it has to do all of its business in New Jersey. And we've identified 3 lines of business that we really love. Lending to students for student loans at reasonable rates, not loan sharking rates. And then lending through community banks, either to small businesses or to communities to do small-scale infrastructure. And we need all of the above. And so all of that would stay in New Jersey, and there's a huge potential impact. I mentioned stronger and fairer economy. This is a big time in both arenas. For every dollar you lend into a state, you typically get $1.50 of economic activity. We desperately need that in our state right now. So I love the idea. Where do we stand on it? We got to get elected. There's a lot of support for it, a lot of enthusiasm. When you walk through the concept, people like it. The community banks, we previewed it with them before we went live. They like it. The big Wall Street banks, frankly, don't like it. I don't have the violin of sympathy out for them. I think this is a big game changer for New Jersey, and I'm glad you asked about it, Alan. Thank you. Roberta Walters coming in from Manville. Where are you, Roberta? Come on, man. How are you? I'm great. All the better for having you all with me.
Thank you.
Planned Parenthood having endorsed me a couple weeks ago. I'm still walking on air. Yeah. You have a question on reproductive health.
I do. Thank you. Reproductive rights are under attack from this administration. What will you do specifically to ensure New Jersey women have access to birth control and other critical reproductive health care needs?
Let's hear it. Come on, everybody. Roberta, thank you. So I mentioned in passing that I had been endorsed by Planned Parenthood a couple of weeks ago. How excited am I by that, and honored and humbled. So for those of you who are flying the pink tonight, thank you all, and to all your sisters and brothers. And it's a very, so there are several, like a lot of challenges we have, there's no one great move that you can sort of say, okay, we did it. There are a number of moves that we have to make. Number one, this governor and lieutenant governor. The lieutenant governor, I believe, has said that even though she's pro-choice, she would continue defunding Planned Parenthood. So beginning in the year 2010, the Christie Guadagno administration defunded Planned Parenthood to the tune of $7.5 million per year. And that's a cumulative impact now of 8 years. You're well over $50 million cumulatively. At first, the governor said he couldn't find the money, as you all remember, and then it became part of his shtick to run for president in a right-wing Republican party. And we continue to have the same reality today. And the results, by the way, for those of you who have not followed it, the results are loud and clear, stark, and shocking. So I believe 6 locations have closed in that time. Women have gone without a whole range of health services, whether it's neonatal or cancer screenings or any number of other variety of health care that Planned Parenthood provides. There has been a significant increase in sexually transmitted diseases in this state. And when experts look at it, and I'm not an expert, so I have to rely on others, there is no doubt about the correlation between the drop in funding and the increase in the incidence of the transmitted diseases. And my opponent said I ought to be talking about things, I don't want to put, this is not a quote, but essentially I ought to be talking about things like property taxes more and not making wild statements about women's health and women's lives being put at risk. Well, with all due respect, this is America. I think we could both talk about property taxes, but the reality is women's lives have been impaired, put at risk, please God, I hope not lost, but there is no doubt this is a self-inflicted health care crisis by this governor and lieutenant governor. Let's not call this anything other than what it is. That's what this is. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the money back in, right? Secondly, I said on the day that I was endorsed, we're going to at least do that, because this is not necessarily said out of strength, but out of fear that cuts will come at us federally. And the numbers federally in New Jersey are meaningful. I forget, 23 or something $million, I believe. Does that sound right? In New Jersey. My concern is that that is at risk. So we will do everything we can to, we're going to replenish what we're cutting ourselves, but we're going to have to reach beyond that if the feds come at us. We're going to have to continue to defend the Affordable Care Act, right? We're going to have to stand on behalf of the ability for women to get a year's worth of contraception at one time, and not sort of having to go through hoop after hoop to keep going back to the well. And so those are some things that occurred. Funding it at the state level, making up for whatever defunding may come at us at the federal level, standing strongly on behalf of the Affordable Care Act, making access to contraception and other vital drugs and services as easy and as pliable as possible. Those are some of the steps I would take. Keep the faith. Help is on the way. Both health and help are on the way. Oh, I got 2 long or 4 short. Is that what you said? Yes. Okay. Can the 4 short be like yes or no questions? Okay, good. This is not an easy one. Marcela Jimenez, labor standards at Newark Airport. Marcela, was I close?
You were very close, Marcela Jimenez.
Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Together we can, Marcela. Juntos podemos, yeah?
Nosotros podemos, yes.
All right.
I'm a research analyst for Unite Here Local 100.
I love y'all. Let's hear it for them, right?
Yes. So we represent airport workers here in Newark. Concessions, they serve everyone. So my question is, do you support improving labor standards at Newark Airport? Example, healthcare, wages, benefits. How do you plan on doing so?
Let's hear it. Great question. I'll take the card back if you don't mind. Let's hear it from Marcella. The answer is yes. This is not just one where I can say, this is an important point. Joe was so nice introducing me. He talked about my upbringing. And I want to just say, I just turned 60 last week, so please bear with me. My life is like any of us, a book with a lot of different chapters. Right? You have a lot more chapters yet to write. Of all the things I've done, chapter number 1 is the most important for me, the one that Joe referred to. My dad didn't get out of high school. My mom did. She made sure we got educated. He made sure we cared about politics, service, the community. We were working poor. I worked under the table when I was 13. I slept in my parents' bedroom till I was 9. We were happy, by the way. That tells you something. Different America, imperfect America. An America where you knew if you went to school, you got good grades, you stayed out of trouble, you're going to do better than mom and dad. And if you said, what's the single reason you're running for governor? That little kid, working poor family, certainly in poverty, too often in the middle class today, doesn't have that same deal before them. That's the singular reason I'm running. If you ask me what's the one overarching reading, I say all that for one reason. What you're asking about is not abstract for me. I don't have to read this in a book. I've lived it. And in another way, I'm proud to say that on behalf of not Unite Here, but 32BJ, I was asked and I testified before the Port Authority's commissioners for $15 minimum wage at Newark Liberty. Why are we paying a different minimum wage at LaGuardia and John F. Kennedy for the same work 30 miles from each other and paying less than that in New Jersey, other than our governor and lieutenant governor view that as a political wedge, a statement that they want to make. So whether it's wages, whether it's health care, whether it's conditions, Newark Liberty is a big, important, iconic asset for this state. We have to run it professionally, and we have to run it on behalf of everybody, in particular for the working men and women who go there every day. So I got your back on this one. You have my word. Carol Mazuski, in from Long Valley, on vacant homes. Where are you, Carol? Come on, Carol. How are you?
Good.
Get that microphone right up there.
Okay.
Let's get a shot right here.
Sure.
You and me. We're back together again, Carol and Phil.
Okay, my son, take one while we're at it.
Let's go. What's your son's name?
Matthew.
Hold on.
Matthew, is this a movie or a photo? Okay, let's get one with Matthew now. Come on.
Okay.
Do a selfie, Matthew. Let's go. Come on. Any other siblings or family members with you here today? Okay. What time is our barbecue? I'm coming over to your house on Labor Day. Okay. Carol, you got a question on vacant homes.
Yes, and you kind of touched on it before.
I think I may have, yep.
Yes, you have. I said there are quite a number of towns in the state, and many in this area, where there are a lot of abandoned homes and vacant homes.
Yep.
Would it be beneficial if the state were to consider buying these homes and turn them into affordable housing, and how would this help alleviate the tax?
Let's hear it for Carol. Great question.
Thank you.
Please. I'll be quick on this one because I think I hit it. Other states are doing this. Federal money is sitting there. If we were to get our fair, I'll give you two math problems to take home with you. If we were to get our fair share of the federal money sitting there yet to be deployed, and I say fair share, we have 9% of the foreclosed homes in America, so if we got 9% of the money, you with me? It's upper $800 million. Matt and his team have concluded, I mentioned Atlantic County leads all counties in the nation of foreclosed homes. Matt's team has concluded we could buy every single vacant foreclosed home. By the way, there are two types of foreclosed homes, right? One is with people still in them. We ought to do everything we can to keep them in those homes. But more of them, more often than not, they're empty. It would cost a total of $55 million to buy every single foreclosed home in Atlantic County and then repurpose them as affordable housing rentals. You work with nonprofits. They're doing it in other states. There's no reason why we can't do it in New Jersey. Carol, great job. Okay, you ready? Gail from Bedminster has got a question. Gail's like Cher or Elvis. Gail from Bedminster. How are you, Gail?
Hi.
You got a question on clean energy.
I have the same reading glasses.
Do you want to put this? Want to use mine? You want me to read it? You got to get the microphone up there.
Just hold it out there.
Yeah. Get the microphone up to your face.
No. Basically, the question is on clean energy for New Jersey.
Yes.
What energy projects are you in favor of? Offshore wind, more solar arrays? How are we going to get to 100%?
Let's hear it for Gail. All right, from Bedminster. Okay, I'm going to answer two at the same time. These are the last two, unless Jenny yells at me. Elizabeth Kano has got a question of people and businesses leaving New Jersey. Where are you, Elizabeth? Elizabeth, how are you?
How are you?
I didn't know that was your last name. Honored.
Good evening, and it's always a pleasure to have you here.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches. And analysis, excuse me. Can I have my glasses? My husband.
How about? And then can we give Dale the
I
glasses
like you.
after
I
we
need my
finish?
glasses.
Okay. And don't forget, I want to know what time the barbecue is on Labor Day. All right?
An analysis by CNBC last year identified New Jersey the 10th most expensive state in which to live, based on housing, utility, food, and medical costs. What would you, Phil Murphy, do to prevent the New Jersey residents and industries from leaving the state? By the way, my boss had to let it go 40 women working women.
Why?
Because the cost. They are leaving the state. Everybody.
Is he still your boss?
Yes.
Can I call him a jerk or not? Why do you do that? Okay, let's hear it for Elizabeth. Okay. Do you live in Elizabeth?
Yes.
Do many people comment all the time that you're Elizabeth from Elizabeth?
Yes.
Just want to check that. Let's start with Elizabeth, and I'll go to Gail. Listen, the simple answer in the interest of time is just where I started, a stronger, fairer economy that works for everybody. We get this economy growing again, we make it fair again, and everybody gets a piece of the pie, we're in a different place. And to give you some sense of what we're missing, we think that over the past 5 to 7 years, we've left 20 to 50 billion, with a B, dollars of economic activity on the table, just because we had poor leadership and our state didn't grow enough. It wasn't strong enough, and it wasn't fair enough. There's no reason why we can't do both, except for leadership. We need the right leadership that understands how sophisticated economies are built and are propelled in the 21st century. I'd raise my hand and say with humility, I think I've got those skills and those instincts. That's the pass-fail test. I mentioned moral authority. We need moral authority in our leaders, and we need skills that understand how you make a stronger and fairer economy that works for every family. Gail, we got a clean energy 100% objective by the year 2050 in our plan. And we believe with all our heart that we can get there by then. That sounds like a big step. The big chunks are reigniting solar, which you talked about, having a much more enlightened mindset on conservation. You know, for instance, right now, a utility would go to get rate pay credit from a regulator. They would say we have to build a 300 megawatt plant to get the return so we can earn our return on equity. How about, which other states are doing, enlightened ways, how about getting credit for saving 300 megawatts of energy and getting a return on that that looks just like the return you'd get on building that plant? By the way, in both avenues, you create great, well-paying, high-paying union jobs, and that ought to be the hallmark of whatever you do. Environmental justice is a big thing, particularly in a community like Elizabeth. So when we think, too often when you think of the environment, you think of open spaces and the highlands and the pylons, and that's all, we should be thinking of that. But we also have to think about the rate of asthma that our little kids have in a community like Newark or Elizabeth, where you're next to the port and all the truck traffic. So that's a big part of our program. What can we do to not just, and by the way, this is a huge opportunity, I believe, in our state to do good and do well. This is not one of these either or shots that the other side of the aisle wants us to believe in. It's rejoining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative collection of states, which we will do. And lastly, and not lastly, but the one other one I want to mention is offshore wind. So I mentioned 100% clean energy economy by the year 2050. We believe we could get to 3,500 megawatts, 3,600 megawatts in offshore wind, 3,500 megawatts. Who's counting those megawatts? By the year 2030. That's only 13 years from now. And that sounds like an abstract number, but here's what you need to know about 3,500 megawatts. That powers 1.5 million homes. So we believe all of the above is achievable. The minute the president pulled us out of the Paris Accords, we said if we're elected, we will adhere to those standards, and we will, right? So, and again, the current administration treats this as though we're do-gooders, that this will be at the expense of the economy. And the reality is the exact opposite. You do good and you do well. I've said this before, and I believe this all in my heart. We could be the California of the East Coast. And I really believe that, right? So with that, we're at Union County College. It's a school night. We got to let you good people go. Thank you so much for coming out, for helping us out. Murphy4NJ.com. Thank you all so much.